Are you good, Bethany?
I think so.
I can see it on this screen now, so.
Okay, thanks for your patience, everyone. We're just working out the quirks of Skype for Business, so I appreciate that. What's wrong?
I don't see that.
Huh?
I want to see that.
So we're fortunate to have Neil Kamman and Perry Thomas presenting on local implementation teams. And for those of you in the room, thanks again for joining us. And I see some guests here, so that's wonderful that you came. And if you have any questions at any point, we have the next hour for the presentation, but feel free to ask away. And if you're listening online, you can type in your question in the message box. We are recording this. It will be posted on our YouTube page. And I am Bethany Sargent. If you're online, you may see me as Emily Bird. But the talking voice is actually Bethany Sargent with the Clean Water Initiative program. If any folks online are having any technical difficulties, either with the audio or the video, just type in on the message box, and I'll be monitoring those through the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Neil Kamman, who is going to be setting the stage for local implementation teams before we hear from Perry about the Lake Carmi Implementation Team.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, good morning, folks. I am Neil Kamman, Manager of Monitoring, Assessment, and Planning Program, and I think I know everybody in the room and everybody on the phone. So I'm here to just basically set the stage for Perry to kind of tell us the story of the Lake Carmi Implementation Team, which is a really neat success and some very, very good outcomes going on up there right now. As a precursor to that, I want to speak a little bit about why local implementation teams are important to our broader efforts to conduct watershed management in Vermont's watersheds. So I just want to take a little trip back down memory lane for folks and remind you all that our implementation that we do, our watershed improvement projects, are fixing things that are broken and are restoring things that are broken and are protecting surface waters that show very high quality. Doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it doesn't happen willy-nilly. We have a fairly robust planning process, the tactical basin planning process that we use to identify where to fix things and where to protect things. And so I contend that implementation starts with tactical basin planning. And just as a reminder, there are 15 planning basins in the state of Vermont. You can see them on the map up here. And we have 5 tactical basin planners, a few of which are in the room or online. Each planner is responsible for producing a basin plan for each of their 3 districts every 5 years. And so they have basins that are in rotation. One planner will have a district that's in active planning. Karen Bates, for example, is finishing up the Missisquoi Basin Plan right now, very important hot topic plan, but also has 2 other watersheds, the direct to North Lake Champlain and the Winooski River, that are in either monitoring assessment phase or in active implementation. And so on the lower right, you can see, just for example, is our schedule of basin plan production and the relevant planner who's involved. And I just put that in to dress the slide up a little bit and remind you all of this process. And the outcomes of the tactical plans are what's important. It's not doing the plan. It is actually identifying the opportunities, either for protection of streams like the one you see to the right here, which is a very high quality class A1 level stream in the National Forest, but also restoration actions, of which there are plenty, and we'll learn a little bit more about in the Lake Carmi area. There's plenty of opportunities for restoration up there. Our basin plans also identify opportunities for municipal bylaw amendments, recommendations to upgrade municipal regulations so that water quality is protected not only at the state level but at the municipal level and is consistent with a variety of federal or state regulations. And new to the basin plans that we're producing now and then subsequently are focused TMDL allocations. So the Lake Champlain TMDL is now issued and on the street, covers all of the Lake Champlain Basin, including Lake Carmi area. There is a TMDL for Lake Carmi. There will shortly be a TMDL for phosphorus for Memphremagog. And for those who don't know, a TMDL is a pollution control plan and a budget. So in our tactical basin plans, we endeavor to take the very broad scale pollution reduction goals required by the Lake Champlain TMDL and downscale them into very fine scale watershed units so that we understand how much phosphorus comes off of a certain area of the landscape and how much it needs to be reduced and what the methods are to do that. And so I think some folks in the room will have seen this slide before, and I've been showing this slide for quite a while as we've been evolving our planning process. Previously, I had a map like the one on the left, which was real, and then a map like the one in the middle, which was not really real. It was just a map of catchments, and then a table on the lower right, which was absolute fantasy. If you were able to zoom in and look at that table carefully, you would realize that it just had gibberish in there, some Latin and, some things like, fix Mike Klein's stream because he has garbage in it or something like that. That has changed. The map that you see in the middle is the estimated phosphorus load from developed land expressed at the catchment scale. Some of those catchments are extremely small in geographic scope. And then the table that you see is the actual implementation table for the municipality of Underhill, a subset of it, identifying culvert replacement opportunities, easement opportunities, and things of that nature. So we've gotten to a place where now we're able to publish with pretty significant geographic detail lots of opportunities for projects. And now the opportunity that we have, or the challenge that we have, is to get those done in order to comply with Act 64 and meet our nutrient reduction goals. And so I want to talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities, first of our basin planners, and then afterwards, opportunities and prospective roles of local implementation team members. And so the thing to start with is that every watershed is unique, and that's what makes our basin planners, folks like Karen, Danielle, Ethan, so valuable. Marie and Ben, just to get everybody out there on the table. They know who the partners are. They are not newbies to this. They've been working with a lot of people for a long time. They know the funding sources, but most importantly, they also know at a very granular level what lives in that implementation table. So the new implementation table for the Lamoille Basin Plan is 1,100 lines of individual project area opportunities. The Missisquoi is 600 or so. And of those, many are assessment level, meaning that that road defines an assessment project, some stormwater master plan or road erosion inventory that is going to yield a couple dozen prospective projects that need to be done. So again, the basin planner knows where all that is, but we have to also get that work done. Planners are part of the development of the criteria for selection of ecosystem restoration or clean water initiative grants. And so in interacting with folks who would apply for funding, understand the playing field. And folks who have been in that game for a while and have applied for funds in the past know that the criteria are evolving, and we're ever kind of improving our business process around tying our limited resources to the most important projects that we have. And so the planners are a very important conduit out to our partners who do work and who apply for grants. And lastly, I just want to say that one of the things that the Clean Water Initiative program did collectively with my program and with our planners was to host a series of 4 grant workshops that just elapsed. Those were really quite successful, I understand. Over 100 participants across the 4 different workshops that we held. And the important part of that was the level of questioning and the opportunity for developing common understanding among all those partners really underscored the need for these types of sort of get everybody together before we open up a release of money so that people can understand what the high priorities are and come together around packages of projects. And now I want to talk a little bit about prospective roles and responsibilities around local action teams. And there are a lot of different players, and every watershed, as I said, is different. So I'm going to go through some of the partners that are listed in this infographic here, and I'm going to miss some people, and so please do not take offense if I missed your group, and I may misrepresent, and so please don't take offense there. But Agency of Agriculture is a statutory partner to the basin planning process, which means they are part of our core partners that produce those basin plans. The important role of Agency of Agriculture is that they understand the inspection schedule for farms under the new RAPs and the new agricultural rules of Act 64. They know where those farms are at once they're inspected. They know what the opportunities are for improvement. they also would know on a farm-by-farm basis what the highest priority BMPs may be to address nutrient pollution. And so they can bring that to the table. Even though we may not be able to publish that information publicly due to federal confidentiality issues, they know it. And in a sort of developing a game plan framework, they can be bringing that information forward. They also control a substantial amount of funding for best management practice implementation. NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, is a very important partner as well. They have field conservationists, technicians, and engineers in the field actively looking at farms, perhaps as delivered by Agency of Ag or perhaps as brought forward by another partners that I'll talk about subsequently here. There is a substantial amount of money available from NRCS through the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, and that money is dispersed through CREP signups, right? Allie, correct? That money goes through CREP? EQIP, sorry. Okay, so different NRCS program. But bottom line, there's a lot of opportunity to direct money to the right place. And one of the things that NRCS does in conjunction with us is that they conduct very high resolution planning for some of these smallest catchment areas that you see. So for example, the Lake Carmi watershed and Pike River watershed in the U.S. So that's an area just about twice the size of the Lake Carmi watershed, is one of the target intervention areas for which NRCS has put together a very high resolution plan, literally mapping every gap in every buffer, mapping every opportunity for a BMP to interrupt water coming off of a facility or a road getting into surface waters. And those BMP implementation schedules become part and parcel of our tactical basin plans. So in terms of VTrans, VTrans controls funding for local roads and controls funding for back road assessments. Therefore, they're an important partner there. They're not necessarily always at the table in a local implementation team, although sometimes they are. I've seen it happen down in the Lewis Creek watershed where VTrans took a very active role. VTrans has a suite of responsibilities of their own under the Transportation Separated Sewer System, the TS4 permit. It's their regulation under the Vermont Clean Water Act. What that means is they may be doing a large road project and they may be implementing significant water quality fixes to which a local partner can attach another project that's happening, or to which we might have an opportunity for, say, something as simple as a hand tool field crew to come in and do some improvements like VYCC or something like that. I'm going to expand a little bit on the RPCs. The RPCs and the conservation districts are both important partners in our efforts to get work done and in planning. Both RPCs and conservation districts are statutory partners to the tactical planning process, and so as we develop the basin plans and the implementation tables, we do it in conjunction with them. The RPCs, Regional Planning Commissions, are a primary conduit for municipal outreach of the basin plan. So when the basin plan articulates priorities for municipal bylaws or municipal activities, it's the RPC that's taking that to the municipality so they understand what those requirements or what those recommendations are. They assist municipalities or others in developing applications for funding to support inventories, to support stormwater master plans. They may coordinate large-scale funding packages. So an RPC could serve to knit together a suite of smaller projects into one project application and bring together multiple partners who might want to do a set of projects in a geographic area so that those partners don't have to deal with the overhead, the administration of grants, and rather just do the project and bill the RPC, and then the RPC gets to deal with us and all our fun. And then the RPCs also conduct complementary planning processes that they're required to do, transportation planning initiatives, so transportation plans at the regional level, hazard mitigation planning at the town level, all identify opportunities for cross-pollinating our water quality improvements so that we get the biggest bang for the buck. If we put a project here or here, one project may result in a greater hazard mitigation value than another. And so all other factors being equal, let's get that co-benefit. In terms of the conservation districts, they also conduct municipal outreach activities, and there are some areas where the conservation district has better relationships around the water quality world than the RPCs do. And in that instance, sometimes the conservation districts are the primary go-to to go talking to the municipality about any particular regulation that they might consider. They do on-the-ground stormwater master planning. They do road erosion inventory work. They do planning for easements a little bit. They serve as agricultural resource specialists and land treatment planners for the Agency of Agriculture, which means they're go-to folks to get out on farms and identify opportunities for improvement there. The districts have a pretty high degree of capability in stream buffer restoration and some stream bank restoration using soft techniques that match the equilibrium goals of the state. And they also have to date coordinated some larger scale funding applications. A good example is the statewide Trees for Streams program, where Vermont Association of Conservation Districts, brings in a large amount of money that then goes to individual districts to do individual buffer plantings. UVM Extension is active throughout the state, assisting the agricultural community and the forestry community, but I'll focus on the agricultural community here. They often serve as the sales force to get out there and find prospective projects and bring the operator, the farmer, to the best cost share program to achieve the goal. They're particularly strong in the South Lake watershed, where their efforts are complemented by the Conservation District down there. Let me see. And then we get to the sort of statewide or watershed level nonprofit groups, and this is where I'm totally going to miss a whole bunch of people, but I'm just going to list a few things. So in the context of sort of technical planning, I've mentioned stormwater master planning and road erosion a lot. That's because it's extremely important assessment work that we need to identify the best remediation priorities. Friends of Winooski River, White River Partnership have done a lot of work like this. There's a lot of groups that do on-the-ground implementation. Those same types of groups that did the planning might carry one or two projects to fruition. Since VYCC is sitting in the room, I'll kind of point to them as an example of getting local intervention teams to very localized area to do projects that have been identified, especially erosion control projects. In the area of conservation, so buying easements or conserving, bringing farms to Vermont Land Trust, conserving their ongoing farming operations, but then setting back from the river and getting channel management rights. Lewis Creek Association has done some amazing things at conserving that entire river corridor. In terms of water quality monitoring, we have 17 groups, I think, active right now statewide doing water quality monitoring. All of those data participate and contribute to the development of the Tactical Basin Plan and allow us to ground truth those red dots and those yellow dots on the map, or splotches. Southeast Vermont Watershed Association, Memphremagog, Addison County River Watch, Poultney Meadowy, there's a lot of them. They're all very valuable. There's actually some watershed associations get right into not only agricultural, like large-scale agricultural project management, but also research. Friends of North Lake Champlain have been active. They've got a couple of conservation innovation grants, SIG grants through NRCS, putting innovative practices onto farms to see how well they work. I mentioned stream buffer restoration already through the districts. Some of the watershed associations are real strong on that as well. MRBA comes to mind. And then habitat restoration is another place where you may get some significant water quality benefit from restoring habitat, possibly through passage, possibly through dam removal, or possibly through other mechanisms. Trout Unlimited, Connecticut River Watershed Council are examples there. So I called on some people who are doing great work, and there's other great work going on. I didn't call on the Franklin Watershed Committee because they get the whole rest of the presentation. But that, in a sense, gives you a 360, if you will, of the roles and responsibilities of different partners who would come together to comprise a local implementation team. The benefits of which are the coordination. Everybody knows what everybody's doing, and everybody understands what the priorities are. The opportunity to package projects together so there's administrative efficiency, so you don't have 6 individual groups trying to administer 6 individual grants. You do one grant, it's more efficient for us, it's more efficient for ag, or it's more efficient for NRCS, and it's more efficient for the groups doing the work. And I said the last bullet, so I won't say it already. And I think that allows me to sort of set the stage for you, Perry, and I will pass you the mouse.
Do we want to ask any questions before I get started?
Does anybody in the room have any questions, or online if you are
a lot of information
participating in the webinar, feel free to type in your question online. Okay, not hearing or seeing anything. Turn it over to Perry.
Okay. So the Carmi TMDL team. Many of the members are here in the room or on the phone, and I want to start by saying that Jess Draper or Karen Bates could easily tell the story I'm about to tell. They've been integral members of the organization, and John Barrows, who is now president of the Franklin Watershed Committee, is getting up to speed and will soon be able to tell the story I'm about to tell, and he is in the room. Jess Draper's on the phone.
And Perry, I think the mouse might be up in the, yeah, there you go. If you move and just, yeah, there.
Great.
And then just click on the right button and it should advance.
So this is a work in progress. We welcome feedback to the story. As most of you probably know, Lake Carmi is a fairly large lake, about 1,400 acres in the northern part of the state. It's about an hour's drive from Burlington, so it's a popular destination for people from Burlington as well as people from across the country. There are an active group of shoreland property owners. If you look at the Carmi Campers Association website, you'll see images of all sorts of festivals that they hold during the summers, including a sailboat regatta and just a celebration of the Lake's Day with a wonderful spirit to them. The local fishing community loves the lake, and there are many people that enjoy the state park, Lake Carmi State Park. I also understand there's the occasional flyboarder on the lake. The Northeastern Flyboard Association apparently calls Lake Carmi their home lake, although I've never, is this a one-time demonstration? I don't know how, yeah, one-time demonstration. Yeah, on one of their festival days, a flyboarder appeared. Meanwhile, as many of you know, the lake is surrounded by farms. It's in a beautiful, picturesque basin, and it's a classic Vermont landscape with some active farms, some farms that are no longer active, but a lot of agricultural activity in the watershed, as well as many back roads, private roads that need management, and shoreland properties in the process of restoration. We've had active LakeWise projects on the lake for several years now. The map on the left shows the number of properties that are actually involved in LakeWise at various stages of the process of becoming LakeWise certified. And on the right is an example of a water bar put in on one of these properties' driveway. Lake Carmi also has its very own TMDL, which was already in place last summer when Act 64 took effect. The goal for the summer average in the lake is 22 parts per billion. The average has been hovering between 30 and 40 parts per billion. So when I came on board as Lakes Program Manager just about 2 years ago, it was brought to my attention that we had some work to do on Lake Carmi, and I got to work on getting up to speed on what the challenges were. I noticed that the pie chart for the various contributors of phosphorus to the lake from the watershed was very similar to that for Lake Champlain, with a little bit extra emphasis on agriculture, but many of the same challenges that Lake Champlain has. And Karen and Jess and others reinforced that there was much concern about agricultural land management as I came into the scene. The challenges further illustrated here. The image on the left came across my desk just about a year ago in October. That's an example of one of the cyanobacteria blooms that were especially prevalent the summer of 2015. It was a bad cyanobacteria year, so we were really concerned about health concerns around the lake. And then also just a year ago to this month, Fritz Gerhardt finished his analysis of La Rosa water quality data for the larger Missisquoi Basin, including this map that he put together for the Carmi watershed. The red dots on that map are places where streams are bringing in more than 100 parts per billion phosphorus. Orange between 65 and 100. So we have some major contributors still to the phosphorus challenge on the lake. So just a year ago, Karen Bates, the Basin Planner for the region, Jess Draper, and then Franklin Watershed Committee President Bruce Bushy and I got together on the phone and said, would it be possible to create a coordination group that would help to accelerate the work in the watershed in a manner consistent with the new Act 64? And Karen said, hey, that sounds like an implementation team. And so we scratched our heads and worked to figure out what an implementation team might be and how that would look on the ground in Franklin. Jess Draper, since you didn't have a picture when you signed on, I have one for you here. That's Jess Draper in the upper left. And this is a big picture concept map that she put together. We won't go into the details of that other than to point out that in the very middle is the implementation team. So she's showing that it's coordinating all the efforts of lots of different groups across the region and focusing in on Lake Carmi. And I'm going to blow up the center part of that concept map and show you that the implementation team does spring directly from Act 64 in concept, and it's essentially what Neil described, tailored to the needs of Lake Carmi. And as I understand it, we're still fleshing out the full concept of implementation teams across the state. But my understanding is that each implementation team is going to look different based on the needs of the particular water body that it's addressing. And I'll also point out on this slide, if I can do so without advancing it, that over here on the left is the revised tactical basin plan. We were fortunate as we put the implementation team together that Karen Bates was just beginning the process of fleshing out the new implementation table for the tactical basin plan that's now in full draft form and making its way toward the final stage a year later. And so this is Jess's portrayal of our team members from our Facebook page that Jess put together. We have a Facebook page with a growing number of followers. We're looking forward to growing that further. And so you can see that many of the members are consistent with the parties that Neil described as being important players, including the local municipality. The Toxics Action Center has been helpful to us because one of our main challenges as an organization was to improve communications, and Toxics Action Center's specialty is in creating communication networks that are tailored to particular problems, and so they've been helpful. There's QUIP. The Farmers Watershed Alliance has been active in the area and have been helpful in our communications with farmers. The local RPC, the Northwest Regional Planning Commission, Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, who had been active in the area and continue to be active, NRCS, Franklin Watershed Committee, Lake Carmi Campers Association, and the Agency of Agriculture have all sent representatives to the team over the past year, and most had representatives at our organizational meeting just a year ago in October. So over the first few meetings, as we got our minds around the challenge, including Fritz Gerhardt's data of the various tributaries, what they were bringing in, where the high priorities were, what the strategies were on Karen's draft implementation table, we developed 4 big picture goals to take us well into the future. We understand that these are long-term goals. to guide project development and implementation for the Lake Carmi Phosphorus TMDL in conjunction with the tactical basin planning process, to manage education and outreach efforts. And this is really more of a coordination role, just making sure that member groups are aware of what the other member groups are planning so they don't all plan things for the same day, that sort of thing. Track progress toward meeting TMDL goals for Lake Carmi and provide input for TMDL progress reports. This is in collaboration with QUIP. Emily Berg came to some of our original meetings and helped us frame this goal because at the same time, of course, the Lake Carmi watershed is part of the big picture for the Missisquoi Basin and Champlain watershed as well. And to serve as a conduit for information about the TMDL implementation process among local, regional, and state organizations. So really serving as a communication hub. And in terms of process, our team has come together informally. We're not a 501c3. The Franklin Watershed Committee does have 501c3 status and has served so far as the primary applicant for grants that the group has sent proposals for. We have designated representatives from each member organization, but the meetings are open, so anyone in the area can come if they'd like. We do meet monthly in Franklin with a teleconference option for people to call in from afar. And the official co-sponsors, as I'd said earlier, were the Franklin Watershed Committee and the DEC Watershed Management Division, and we've been sharing expenses related to the team's work. So some of the things we've done, we did collaborate with Karen in organizing the public meeting that is part of the tactical basin planning process. And not only did we have the usual characters, but we also had Secretary Ross, Commissioner Shuren, Neil Kamman was there describing some history of the TMDL in the area and steps that have been taken to meet it so far. That was an exciting meeting. And we supported Jess Draper and the Franklin Watershed Committee in organizing their annual meeting with some extra informational presentations, including a wonderful presentation by Josh Faulkner from UVM Extension describing farming and the climate change connection and the ways that our management of phosphorus has changed over time and helping us to understand the legacy phosphorus in the watershed, which I found really useful. And you'll see that there was a little Carmi TMDL implementation team update as part of that meeting. I also wanted to mention Neil had described the role of regional planning commissions on these teams and the important ways that they could participate, perhaps even organize the team. The Northwest Regional Planning Commission has been very helpful in that regard. They've sent representatives to the team meetings, to some of our events, and most helpful has been their work in reaching out to the town of Franklin. They're collaborating with the town of Franklin in addressing some of the major road issues in the watershed. During the year, 2 subcommittees developed from the team. One initiated and coordinated by Jess Draper is addressing the in-lake phosphorus management. Angela Schombaugh, cyanobacteria expert from the Lakes and Ponds program here at DEC, has been providing technical assistance to that committee, and they have developed a couple of proposals for in-lake phosphorus management, one of which would be a floating island here at the mouth of Marsh Brook. That's what this image is. So there'd be a floating island, much like this real island that's appeared during this low water summer. So we have engineers looking at that possibility, or Jess Draper's been working with the engineers looking at that possibility, and we're coordinating that with our permitting team to make sure that it would be a viable proposal going forward. Another subcommittee that developed was an indicators group. The group realized that just shooting for 22 parts per billion in the lake was a long-term, almost impossible to imagine goal for this group. They wanted more tangible goals, benchmarks that we can point to, that we can track over the next 5 years. And so you'll see those listed here with some initial values, including the SECI depth, number of people attending water quality workshops as an indication of the effectiveness of the education outreach, number of shoreline property owners participating in LakeWise. We're hoping that will grow to everyone around the lake and it will become a LakeWise lake. Number of farms with approved nutrient management plans in collaboration with the NRCS. Number of farmers who have successfully applied for NRCS grants. We still need to get additional numbers going forward on that. Number of field acres on which farmers are contracted to implement BMPs. And the number of hours invested by the town of Franklin in harvesting milfoil. We thought that was going to start out at 0 because the harvester was broken down for much of the summer, but apparently we got 25 hours. So one of the things that I want to point out here is that this table only goes to 2020. It's a 5-year window. And that's representative of the coincidence between RCPP timing. You may know that the Franklin watershed and other watersheds in the area, sub-watersheds, are recipients of RCPP funding, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program that Neil mentioned coming through NRCS. They have a 5-year timetable consistent with the Technical Basin Planning 5-year timetable. So this 5-year window is useful for us right now, and we can see those two efforts simultaneously working toward improvement in the tributary streams, and we're hoping to see those red dots turn to orange dots, and the orange dots turn to yellow dots on that map that I showed earlier. So all in all, the example in Franklin, this Lake Carmi TMDL implementation team, is essentially serving the benefits that Neil mentioned: coordination of efforts across the watershed, packaging of projects to create efficiency in administration, a greater appreciation among the different groups in the watershed of the larger implementation picture, and even how just one little water bar is contributing to solving the problems on Lake Carmi. And I would add that in this particular case, where there were divisions among groups before we started around the watershed, serving as a communication hub has been really important for the sake of Lake Carmi. So I'm optimistic. We're celebrating our first anniversary next week as an implementation team, and I have a sense that such local teams are going to be really useful as we move forward in implementation of Act 64. Oh, and I have a pretty picture.
Thank you. So we'll open it up for questions.
Just one question, and I know that you're looking at phosphorus as the driver, primary indicator there, but in your last page where you showed different types of performance outcomes that you're seeking, have you established benchmarks as to where you currently are and then goals for where you want to be over a certain time period?
Yeah, we're in the process of identifying the 5-year goals. Those are brand new. I think Jess put in the new numbers last week of the benchmarks of where we are. And so, yeah, we're in the process of identifying the targets there. That's a good question.
I was curious, most of what I know about Lake Carmi has to do with that really cool bog at the south end of it, and while the bog itself probably doesn't affect nutrients too much, since by definition it doesn't have a lot flowing in or out of it, I was wondering if you'd done any other work looking at other wetlands, either inventory or maybe even restoration or wetland construction within the watershed.
We have, and I'd like to turn that question over to Karen Bates, if I may, because she's taken the lead on that.
Yeah, so there's one area, actually on the other side, Marsh Brook area, where we think there could be some really great restoration work. But with any of these projects, you have to get landowner agreement. It's not required. So we have ideas, and now it's in someone else's hand to, talk to landowners and see if they can get interest.
And is the floating island going to be, obviously that's kind of a wetland of sorts as well.
Its functions are, we've decided a floating island has functions that are ascribed by the people who put it in. So they're limited.
Well,
but we haven't really looked at it as replacing any sort of wetland function somewhere else.
Right, no, I wouldn't want it to be like replacing a wetland that was removed or something, but just in addition, I'm curious, like, what plants are being put on it, if any, and stuff like that.
Jess Draper is on the phone. Are we able to communicate with Jess in terms of the design?
Let me see if I can unmute her. Just a second.
I don't require details or anything. I was just curious because it sounded neat.
All right, so we may come back to that if we can get Jess Draper unmuted. I see another hand in the back.
Karen, who is following up about the Marsh Brook restoration?
Ag resource people.
Who is?
Ag resource people.
Okay, and is there any hope of that 25 acres that the state owns up at the state park, that could be a wetland restoration?
No, because there's no, what they try to do is they work to find areas that were wetland, and that because of land management, they were drained, to try to restore those, because those are natural wetland features on the landscape. They take in water because they're at the bottom someplace. And the wetlands are the agricultural areas, are the agricultural areas that exist now on state land. There is some wetland area, but it's not because it's ditched. It's not at all ditched at this point. So there's no real wetland restoration opportunities on the state land.
How about wetland creation?
Again,
It wasn't a natural, the floating island is artificial.
Right.
We support that concept, but we own 25 acres of state land that could be made into a wetland to help with the Marsh Brook pollution coming down into the lake.
Yeah, so I'm sure that the park, Rob Peterson, who's the manager there, would certainly listen to any proposals that made sense. But in terms of being, the technical side of it, knowing the area, I know that wetland restoration or wetland creation happens to benefit the watershed when water flows into it that needs to be cleaned. And so at this point in time, there isn't a lot that flows from the watershed itself into an area that then can be enhanced. The river itself, the river corridor, is actually in great shape, so we don't want to mess with it. It has floodplain, it's forested, and so if you change it at all, let's say you wanted flows down Marsh Brook to be able to expand out further along a large area, that's not the natural workings of that area, and so there could be a lot of adverse consequences happening when you try to divert water to an area that it's not meant to be diverted that way. So it's in great shape as natural resources in its own right.
I think the state park might be working on doing some kind of constructed wetland for treating the wastewater that comes out of the campground. I don't know much about it.
Yeah, they're doing a great work on managing wastewater there.
Jess typed in a message, which I can read. Her audio doesn't seem to be working. It says the Floating Island project is being led by Eco Solutions Floating Island Solutions. We haven't discussed specific plant species, but the coolest part is the ceramic media that will be included to help absorb phosphorus. We are putting in an ecosystem restoration grant application to scope the best possible design, style, plants, and specific locations within the Marsh Brook mouth area. Thanks, Jess.
So I might suggest that we shift to any questions about implementation teams in general. Lynn, and then over here.
I was just going to ask a little bit more about the collaborative process, because that really seems really interesting how these groups have come together, and just any surprises, any interesting things that you guys found as you came together in terms of, did you find that most of the areas that you felt like you should be working on that some of the groups were dealing with, or did you identify gaps of, oh gosh, there's no one really addressing this issue in Lake Carmi? And just suggestions for as other teams might come together, what you found really successful in terms of your collaborations, and what you might think about doing a little differently.
I knew you were going to turn around.
I have a suggestion, but let's let Karen continue.
Well, I think the one thing we decided we have to work on, this is the first step, is communication. That we realized that there was so much information out there, so many groups doing different things, that we just needed to figure out, well, how are we actually going to make sure that everybody knows what everybody's doing, and be more efficient about how we collect information and disperse it. And so it was great. We came up with a communication plan template, and a few of us actually sat down and hammered it out and have some great ideas, and that really felt good to have it right there as a tool that we can use, and projects come out of it and are completed. Jess has done a few already.
And in terms of another gap, again, it's communication, but the Franklin Watershed Committee was having trouble communicating with shoreline property owners because, of course, they're away for much of the year and they come and go, and they're moving targets. and then it turned out that the Carmi Campers Association was willing to help with those communications. So bridging that gap is a plus. And I expect more of that kind of bridging to happen in the future, and that's what I hope in terms of improvements would be more bridging.
All sorts of information that we hear from all different sources, and it's almost like in rumor control. I kind of wish there was a hotline and anybody from the lake to stop us on a bike and ask a question. Well, what if, I don't know about that. You know, I mean, that happens a lot. So as much communication as possible among the groups involved is certainly helpful. Those of us on the board would ask a question. It's nice to be able to say, at least be aware of something that's happening on the Campers Association, so we can talk to that discussion. It's complicated.
I'm realizing there was another question over here, and then we'll come back to that corner. Yeah.
This is a question more for Neil. I wondered if DEC had formalized the role that you all would play or the resources you would provide for setting up an implementation team. Just so if folks were interested in doing it, if they could sort of look to some sort of guidelines as to what resources were available.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing particularly written, and as I said, each basin is really unique and different, and that's, I mean, so the one big resource that we would provide is Karen, Ben, Ethan, Marie, Danielle. In terms of our basin planners, they do know the agents and actors out there, but they're also, I mean, one of our roles, and Karen, you can please expand, is to set the table for conversations, to make that implementation table have check marks on it. And whatever form that takes, I mean, it takes a different form. I know, for example, Ethan's got 4 different implementation wheels spinning in his watersheds in different places with different people. I don't know if you want to expand at all on that.
Yes, I mean, but actually, we're for the Winooski, which is the next basin I'll be planning. We have a group of people in Huntington that are interested in helping to pursue projects and help with implementation, and so they will be. They don't know it yet. But that will be sort of the first implementation team to be developed. But yeah, they'll be. I'm looking for other areas where there's that same sort of the dynamics, the connections already, that where we can sort of start from something and then get to a much higher level of implementation.
I might just add that, and it's not going to sound like a resource, but it is. the whole new regulatory overlay, what came out of Act 64 and the requirements that are out there upon municipalities for roads and upon landowners for controlling stormwater runoff and et cetera, create a scenario where there are now going to be a very hungry constituency for, oh my gosh, how do I comply? Whether it's a small town or whether it's a landowner who might need a crew to do something on, to treat some impervious or whatever it is. So we're at the beginning of a really interesting period in watershed management in Vermont. All the Act 64 stuff isn't just Lake Champlain, it's everywhere. And a lot of people are going to have a lot of work to do to protect the waters that we're managing. So they'll need you and everybody else who works in the field.
There's a question in the back. John.
I'm John Barrows. I've been president of the Franklin Watershed and have been active in the TMDL meetings for about 6 months. And I started as just an individual citizen participating in the movement. Perry mentioned it was open meeting. It really is. So members of the public, the Englehart's here, and myself and several others, we get to participate as equals and ask questions and receive answers. So I think our TMDL works very well, mostly because of the two people from the state who are very talented and very nice, Perry and Karen. We can have the greatest plan in the world, but it takes the right people to get it done. So we're privileged to have them working with us. And I certainly do recommend other communities doing the Orbit TMDL. It definitely has improved communications. We have a beautiful lake at Lake Carmi. We have a lot of people interested in improving the lake. And, we're very happy with Act 64 and all the work that the state has done. And we're looking forward to, in the next 5 years, making some noticeable improvements at the lake. We have a very small watershed. We have a very manageable watershed. I think it's an attainable goal. But thank everyone that's involved.
Team effort.
Any other questions in the room or online?
How does somebody do online if they're on?
They can type.
Oh. Okay.
And I don't see anybody typing right now. So I just wanted to mention, so next month's brown bag was scheduled to be on funding clean water improvements, and we do have a public meeting scheduled the next week. It's hosted by the Office of the State Treasurer and the Tax Department in partnership with the Clean Water Initiative agencies, Department of Environmental Conservation, Agency of Ag, the Agency of Vermont Transportation. So we invite you instead to attend that meeting. That is on Wednesday, November 16th.
It's not a public meeting, it's a non-governmental
No,
organization.
this was November 16th. Okay. So the November 16th meeting, Wednesday, it's from 9 to 11 in the morning. And it's at the State House, room 11. So we do invite you to attend that meeting next month on that topic. It'll be a much more comprehensive coverage of those issues and of the report to date, the draft report at this point. And Carrie, do you have anything to add?
And just to mention that this is related to the Vermont Clean Water Fund, which provides additional financial resources to address our restoration needs statewide. The current revenues that support the Clean Water Fund actually sunset at the end of fiscal year 18, state fiscal year 18. The intent of this legislative report is to put together a set of recommendations that the Office of the State Treasurer will provide to identify how to establish a long-term set of funding resources to support the Clean Water Fund. What Bethany had talked about is the public meeting on November 16th. There will be a non-governmental organization stakeholder meeting on October 20th from 1 to 3 at the State House. So I do encourage you to participate either at the October, well, ideally at both meetings, the October 20th stakeholder meeting that's going to be specifically targeted to watershed groups and other non-governmental organizations, lake associations included, of course. And the general, much more broader public meeting is on November 16th.
Okay, well, thanks again to Perry and to Neil for discussing this important topic, and thanks to all of you for attending. And just a reminder, this will be posted online on our YouTube page, as are all Clean Water Initiative brown bags.
This is yours, or someone's.
I think it's Bethany's.
Yeah, I manage the Clean Water Initiative.
You're right.
I started working on